Welcome to the Regular People Podcast. I am Wade Allen, and today I'm joined by Aaron. Although, is it just Aaron this time? Or Aaron blank?
Oh, I think I'm Aaron Taylor.
Okay.
I
can't remember. So Aaron has been on 2 previous episodes. This will be Aaron's 3rd time. And I couldn't remember if you wanted to be first name only or not, but
No,
it doesn't matter.
I'm me. I'm out there. Yep. I'm a public figure.
Yeah. So the first time we talked about good and evil, episode 11. Second time, I titled that one Working Less and Living More, and that basically sums up what we talked about. We also talked about communism a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And this time, different, probably pretty different from those 2 other topics. What do you want to say about that?
I think it'll bleed into the first one somewhat because so much of my moral system has to do with thinking about the environment. So if we're going to talk about environmentalism today, it'll probably kind of bleed into that first episode.
Sure.
But what I wanted to say about my 2 previous episodes, they were recorded not a year apart, but what?
Over 6 months apart for sure.
Yeah, 9 months apart.
Yeah.
The first one, episode 11, Good and Evil, was when I was in the middle. I was in the Carpenters Union, in the middle of 2 years of the Carpenters Union, and I was sober from my drug of choice, which is marijuana. And then when we recorded the Working Less and Living More episode, I was in the middle of I had quit the Carpenters Union, and I was just gig economy, working as little as I could.
Yeah.
And I had totally relapsed and was using marijuana all the time. And when I went back and I listened to both those episodes recently,
and you can tell that
back to back, and I was just oh my gosh, the Good and Evil one, I'm so yes, this is awesome, stamp of approval. I sound I sound put together. My ideas are just great. And the second one, I'm just man, oh yeah, I could notice. I don't know if other people can, but I could definitely notice that I wasn't as sharp.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the type of thing that you would notice it more than anybody else would. I haven't gone back and listened to the episodes, so maybe if I did, I would notice too, but I'm not sure. I listened to each episode 5 times while making it.
Mm-hmm.
Or not, that's an exaggeration, but still, I listened to it over and over while making it, and then I don't know, I haven't listened to any of them since.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got new episodes to make.
Yeah.
You don't got time to go back and listen.
Although I think the same kind of thing, maybe not to the same degree, because I don't know, haven't had that many major life upheavals or changes in drug use patterns or anything like that. But I think I would probably notice the same things about types of things about myself listening through previous podcast episodes of I was kind of not really on that one, and I was my mind was on other things. I wasn't as engaged in the conversation or having thoughtful, creative remarks as I might have had, or so on.
Well, I'll say I've listened to every episode, and you're pretty to me it seems consistent, but
that's good.
I guess I brought up the whole thing about sober, and then back, what do they say, off the wagon, on the wagon, off the wagon, whatever, relapsed.
Yeah, I think that's off.
I'm back. I'm back to sobriety, so from my drug of choice, so which is marijuana. So, and that's been going great. I like myself more sober.
Is it the type of thing where almost you would, if you were doing a lot of marijuana right now, would you feel the reverse way? Would you episode 24 more than episode 11? Because
no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so. No,
it's not a personality switch or anything like that.
No, even through a lot of my relapse, which lasted about a year and almost a year and a half, I think. But halfway through that year and a half, I was already I was starting to notice things about my relationships with other people and just how my brain was operating and how less efficient I was at getting stuff done, but also how less efficient I was at being present for other people. So yeah, I was just I knew, I was oh no, I like me better sober.
Yeah.
and then it took a while to sort of transition back out of it. So, but
Well, that's good to hear.
yeah,
I mean, it's I don't know. I don't want it to be too like grandstandy or anything to say, but I do feel like that's probably the better way in terms of personal relationships and I don't know accomplishing goals to live is to like not be drug dependent, to use drugs as like every once in a while recreational activity rather than like a everyday kind of thing. And I feel like that also applies to minor drugs that most people think of as being entirely good or at least benign, like
like pot.
caffeine.
Oh,
I was thinking, or like pot.
yeah, and caffeine too. Yeah,
But, I mean, maybe that's too straight edge for most people. I feel like I'm in the minority, the vast minority of people who don't consume caffeine on a daily basis.
yeah,
But yeah, pot for sure. People like to say, or think anyway, that pot is like basically no downsides. That is not true.
that is definitely not true.
It at the very least strongly affects your memory.
Yeah, like somebody recently said to me, like, after smoking a bunch of weed that they weren't high. And I was like, well, yeah, because like you know, you have a tolerance and stuff.
Right.
They're like, yeah, but I'm not high. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, yeah, but you do act different when you're high because like, why would you be doing the drug if it wasn't affecting your brain in some way, right? So like,
Oh, yeah.
you're definitely, but like, there's this denial about marijuana being a drug. Like, there's all this language of, oh, it's a plant, it's a medicine, and like, I mean, it was definitely very purposeful on my part when I was younger to like use marijuana instead of like alcohol and other hard drugs because it seemed safer, it seemed more introspective.
Yeah.
So it did have like benefits. It helped
Oh, sure. Yeah.
creativity, but it did definitely, with heavy use of high potency marijuana,
Yeah.
definitely became an addiction for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not the type of person who would say it's all bad. I'm just don't like when people make the opposite case.
Sure, that it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
And also that's something that's I guess maybe this is off the topic of our intended
that's all
discussion.
right.
But something that has interested me is a lot of people, especially people that are older and have actually lived through the pot usage over the past like 30 years, have consistently said, or I've heard anyway, that weed nowadays is much stronger than it, and it's like getting stronger over the years. So that like the average, high schooler who's getting weed, they're getting way higher than the average high schooler who's getting weed in like the 90s, the 80s.
They're getting slapped in the face.
They're doing like
with
oil. They're like doing dabs where people were doing like
yeah,
really shitty, just like joints that you would probably get
where you'd have to
mildly
smoke-
buzzed from.
You'd have to smoke many of.
Yeah.
According to my dad, you'd have to smoke many of them to get good and high.
Yeah.
Whereas
now it's
now
like
you can take one hit.
Right. Yeah. You take one hit, and if you're me, half the time you have a panic attack.
Sure, yeah, you're tripping. Yeah, I mean, weed's psychedelic, so
Yeah.
it can definitely send you on a trip. It sent me on a trip many times. So, but when you use it as much as a lot of people do, it ceases to have those
Yeah.
medicinal properties, and it just becomes like a way to hit the dopamine button and just say, it's
Right.
like the easy way out of every situation where you want to feel better. You don't have to fix any of the things that aren't making you feel good about your life. You can just hit the dopamine button by toking.
Yeah.
And like it's just a crappy shortcut, and you become dependent on it, and it scrambles your brain, messes with your memory.
And
Yeah. So it's not all good.
With
Boys and girls.
what you were saying about the person who, says like they're not getting high, but then at the same time, like, then why are you doing it? At some point, once you get dependent, it's like people like to say too that marijuana is non-addictive. And maybe it's
Mhm.
non-chemically addictive, but it's still, what's the word I'm looking for?
Saying marijuana is not addictive, I think, is foolish.
Yeah,
Just the amount of
it's misleading,
endorphin
yeah.
and dopamine rush that you get from using it, there's no way that won't be addictive to some people.
Yeah, it's like pattern forming. It changes your behavior and makes you
It hijacks your whole brain, man.
want to seek it out more. And at some point, it becomes less about positive reinforcement of the things that you receive from being high, and then it becomes about negative reinforcement of just like keeping the
sobriety at bay.
yeah, the non-highness away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, I wasn't using it at work at all, but it would be like the first thing I would use when I get home from work.
Yeah, it's like when it gets to the point where you can't feel normal or can't feel good
Yeah.
without it, then yeah, that's
For me, it was
great.
the not being able to control my usage of it, because I would for like years, like I think I was 20 when I first like had my first. I think I did like 2 or 3 months sobriety. That was when I first realized like, oh yeah, this thing isn't great. And I'm like 32 now, so it's been like a long process of like realizing how much of an addict I am with this drug, and constantly just wanting to be like, well, I'll just like use it at night. I'll just use it sometimes. I'll just use it on the weekend, and like time and time again, just falling back into the habit of using it absolutely as much as I possibly could.
Yeah.
So like not using it when I was studying here at UWM, and like not using it when I was working as a teacher, not using it when I was working as a carpenter, but using it as soon as I was done with all of my responsibilities, and pretty much staying high all of the time and like I just didn't have control over it. And that was like, it's sad to me because I like the drug, but I'm an addict. I'm sober now. I know that I'm an addict now. And so that helps me actually gain some of the tools that I needed to like get completely sober.
Nice.
Yeah.
When did that transition happen?
It was like I started trying to get sober in like February or March of this year, around my birthday in March, I think, is when I started a serious attempt, and then kept like relapsing. I was like, oh, I'll do a week, and then I was like, oh, I'll do 30 days, and then I did 60 days, and then I was like, I want to make this permanent. And now it's been, I think, something like almost 80 days since my last relapse.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That's an effective way, at least it depends on your psychology, I guess. Not every way is effective for everybody, but that's an effective way of habit forming, is like the don't break the chain method of trying to just keep up a streak going. And it's especially helpful if you make it physical. So like the common technique is you print out a calendar, put it on a wall in a place that's like you see every day, like your bedroom, your bathroom, or whatever. And then you put an X through the day if you did or didn't do whatever it is behavior you're trying to make a habit.
Yeah.
And then you see this growing chain of X's, and you're trying not to break the chain.
Yeah, I did something similar. I have a paper calendar that I hang on the kitchen wall, and I use it. I used to use Google Calendar, but then I had to switch to paper because, like, I don't know, something about the digital is just like not real to me. I'm like, it's
Yeah.
not real. I don't take it seriously. But
Right.
the paper calendar, it's like, oh yeah, it's serious. It's real. And I started, so I would write like, I actually did complete sobriety. No, there's basically 4 drugs that I've used regularly in my life. It's nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, marijuana. And I did 30 days. I think I did like 37 days or something, complete sobriety.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's
and then I
impressive.
was just
the way
like,
people talk about it, it seems like nicotine is much harder to quit than a lot of other drugs,
No.
especially marijuana.
not marijuana, not for me.
Not for you.
No.
I guess yeah. That also probably depends on how you're wired.
Yeah, I'm one of those weird weed smokers too, because when I get high, like a lot of people get like kind of like relaxed.
Yeah.
It triggers mania in me. I get like really like
Oh, yeah.
excited about everything.
Isn't that at least somewhat strain dependent? Like
Somewhat,
if you're
yeah,
doing sativa or indica,
but it doesn't matter to me. Whichever one I do,
it's just that's the result.
yeah, I get geeked.
I get in my head and like unhealthily introspective, probably. It's to the point where it often can become like a panic attack. I get worried that I'm not breathing.
Oh yeah,
And I'm for sure I am breathing normally, but like from my side, it seems like it's either like time feels slowed down or my memory is so short that I've forgotten my last breath. So it's like, when was the last time I breathed? Never. I'm gonna die right now, and so
it's a crazy drug, man. It's like a really wild drug. People treat it so like it's so normal. It's like, no, dude, that stuff is really wild.
yeah.
So yeah, I want to do a couple other like updates, because I was kind of like, looking back, I just want to do a couple other updates about.
Well, so one thing I was gonna say though is usually with people that have been on for the first time, I ask them like what have you been doing in life and your thoughts and how have you changed and stuff over the past 5 years. And I was thinking, since you are a regular on the Regular People podcast, it gets less and less interesting or helpful to ask that question, because it's like, well, it's going to be mostly the same answer if it's a 5-year time span. But yeah, would it still be helpful then to talk about since the last time you've been on?
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Okay.
So last time, the work less, live more, I was in the middle of like I had saved up money, and it was just like, honest, I did end up doing like 7 months of barely working. I think I averaged like maybe 10 hours a week or something for
I
like
mean,
7 months.
to me, that's the dream. But
I like 20 or 30. I think that, but so now, so that ended in January. I didn't completely run out of money, but I ran out of the money that I had kind of set
yeah,
aside for that purpose. And honestly, I got a little like I needed something to do. Because I think for me, anyways, and I would think for a lot of people, like having something work, some kind of purpose, some kind of thing that you're contributing to the economy. Like most of our jobs suck and we don't really feel like we're contributing, but like we are, we're offering a good or a service and that's what we're getting paid for. So it like feels good to like offer something to the world. And I had come out of carpentry, and before that I had been a teacher, and I went back to teaching. So I started mid-year last January, so I started for the spring semester, and I was a physics teacher at Carmen Southeast High School. Should I have said that? Yeah, why not? Public figure. And I did that, of course, until June, and then I've been on vacation. Summer break was like 2 months, 8 weeks long, and then just went back to work here in September, and we lost a bunch of teachers, which is pretty normal at schools now. We lost like half our staff.
half. Wow.
Yeah, it's a little more than normal, but
Yeah.
and they were able to find science teachers. So instead of going back to teach physics, I'm back to teach. I'm teaching geometry to 10th graders. So that's what I've been doing for about 4 weeks now, and
You're only 4 weeks in, so maybe you don't have the right comparison, but which do you prefer teaching?
oh, physics.
Yeah.
Dude, that was the first time I taught physics. I would say all them other teachers are suckers, man. Physics is the best subject. It is
Yeah,
so
you get
much
to do
fun.
like demonstrations, experiments. Geometry doesn't really have that.
Physics demonstrations, like hands down, bar none, the coolest thing to do in school.
Doesn't that also require a lot of more effort too, though? Like you have to prepare a
Yeah,
demonstration to
yeah.
do for your
So,
class.
well, I negotiated because there's a teacher shortage in like almost every state in this country, but I negotiated. I was like, I don't want to work full time.
Yeah.
So like, instead of being salaried, I work for $25 an hour. So, and I was only working about 32 hours a week last year, and I was teaching just 3 sections. So yeah, like I was putting in like it didn't feel like too hard to like I had the time. I wasn't too stressed out to like, oh yeah, I'll like build this thing that I need for this demonstration to make class really cool.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It just seems like if you have to grade homework, lesson plan, and then in your lesson planning also include some sort of like experiment that you're gonna do, and you got to make sure that it actually like works when you do it. That
Yeah, we probably did about like
just seems like it would take more effort than
10 or 15 demos
a lot of other
last spring
subjects.
semester.
Yeah.
No, it was so
Probably
it was
fun,
so
though, yeah.
worth it. It was
Yeah,
so worth it because
right.
that's what, like, I had kids that weren't coming to my class, and then they heard about the stuff we were doing, and they started coming to class.
Yeah. Physics is always one of the best classes to be in because of that kind of thing.
Because you come in and you get wow moments.
Yeah. Yeah. You see really cool, weird stuff.
Hmm.
Like your teacher, lays on a bed of nails or whatever it is.
I didn't do that one, but it's a fun one.
Yeah.
So I was kind of mad that I didn't get to teach physics again, and
It's honestly
my
quite
workload is
disappointing
more than
that
I
college
want
physics
now,
doesn't
too.
really include that.
Oh.
Your workload is more?
Yeah. I agreed to take 4 classes instead of 3, and
Oh, okay. Does
with
that
a
put you full time?
I've been working more than 40 hours a week these past couple weeks, yeah. But I'm hoping to get that down. Part of that is like I'm planning ahead and getting used to the class, and I've never taught geometry before, so there's like a fair amount of like extra work that I'm doing on the front end to get the
Yeah.
class running smooth, and like for me to get planned out ahead of the kids. I think I'll get down below 40 in a couple more weeks, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, geometry was not an enjoyable class for me in high school. I actually cheated on my geometry final.
Whoa. No, you did. You did?
I did, yeah. We had to turn in
You
this
heard it here, folks.
this pamphlet of it was geometry stuff, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But it was like some project that we were supposed to have been working on for the past several weeks. So when it came to the day that it was due, I hadn't done anything. So I just asked a girl that was in a different geometry class if I could have her project that she had turned in, and then like I just copied down everything.
Huh. Yeah, I suppose that's cheating.
I mean, I just copied all of her work and turned it in. So
Yeah. But if the teacher gives a take-home final, like, what do they expect?
yeah, I guess.
No, that's definitely cheating. If any of my students are listening, that's cheating. If I catch you doing that, that's a 0.
What do you put the likelihood of your students listening at?
Actually pretty good.
Really?
Yeah, I actually mentioned to them today that I'm recording a podcast episode,
Oh,
and then a
okay.
bunch of them were like, "Oh." So,
I mean, I approve. It'll get me listeners.
yeah, I'm trying to be. I think my brand is honest. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely that's my brand. Everybody knows that about me.
I'm sure they'll
So,
like you a lot more if they hear that you were smoking a lot of weed.
I talked about it with students last year,
Oh, okay.
because I was with juniors and seniors last year teaching physics, and some of them, they're using marijuana.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to just like let them know what my experience was, that like, yeah, it's cool or whatever, but like it's also a drug. Yeah, maybe it's safer than alcohol. Maybe it's like better for certain things than alcohol, like introspection and stuff and creativity. But it's habit forming, addictive,
That's the word I was looking for before. Habit forming. Yeah.
and messes with your memory, scrambles your brain. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I've been honest with my students. I'm
That's
always
good.
honest with my students.
So teaching geometry now. Anything else that has appeared over the last like 11 months or however long since
Yeah,
it's been?
let's see if we get to God by the end of the conversation.
God,
Because that's
okay.
probably like
That
the other one that's like,
that fills me with trepidation, but okay.
uh-oh. You've had other, well, I'm not going to call myself religious. That's a little bit too much,
Yeah,
but
I have.
you've had religious folk
And
on
it's
your
okay, having
podcast.
a religious person on my podcast puts me in a weird position because being honest, I would want to debate them and question their beliefs. But I also don't want to make podcast episodes confrontational or into debates. I'd want them to be more, friendly discussions. And there's
Hmm.
like, you can still question someone's beliefs within the realm of a friendly discussion, but only to an extent, you know?
I agree.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you've done a great job. I really enjoy that aspect of your podcast, that it's not combative. You just kind of like let people.
but then the flip side of that coin is that a lot of the times, I've actually heard this a few times, is that it seems like, or it can seem like, I'm condoning a person's ideas if I don't push hard enough on them.
Hmm.
So it's like, do I push really hard and then make it an uncomfortable debate to listen to and to be in?
Yeah.
Or do I not push hard enough and make it seem like if somebody, even not in the realm of like religious ideas, but if somebody says something that is maybe like not factual in a different way or something like that, and it seems like I am okay with that or like accepting it as fact or
I,
a good idea or whatever it may be, then
I like what you did a couple times, I think, where you added like something to the beginning of the episode where you were like,
yeah,
later on we're going to talk about this, and I didn't offer, but if you want to look into it, here's a couple things that you can look into that like
yeah.
combat that. I really like that. And I think what you're talking about is important because I went through like a Joe Rogan phase.
I think
Boo,
most people
everybody's
have
like,
actually.
boo.
Yeah.
No, but like Joe Rogan's fine, but there was like an episode where he had a guy on and they were talking about, it was like plants, something about carbon emissions are good for plants, and
Yeah.
and like Joe's just going along with it. I'm like, okay, it's done. Like you can be open minded, Joe, but like
Yeah.
you just can't be that
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah. I think most people
Sorry,
listen.
Joe. I know I know you know you're dumb, so it'll be okay.
Sometimes he tries, sometimes he's good, but a lot of the time he's not.
Yeah.
And I think most people, at least I would hope, most people listen to Joe Rogan for the guests, and then they stop listening to Joe Rogan because of Joe Rogan.
Yeah. No, I liked that he was like not into canceling or just like being open minded, right?
Yeah, right.
But you can find that other places.
Yeah.
You can find open mindedness other places, in different podcasts, and not have to deal with somebody like Joe who just is ignorant of a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
one point in Joe's favor. Not that I like Joe Rogan's podcast very much, and I haven't really even listened to it in the past several years. But there was an episode within the past year or so where Jordan Peterson was on, saying a whole bunch of crazy stuff that just wasn't reasonable or true about climate change. And Joe Rogan actually pushed him back on these things a little bit, like more than I would have expected out of Joe Rogan. So, because Jordan Peterson was saying that, like, you can't, like, predict or measure climate. Climate means everything. You can't, like, how can you measure everything? And then Joe was like, what the fuck do you mean by everything? Like, what are you even saying? So every once in a while he does good stuff. But yeah,
Jordan Peterson needs to stick to his wheelhouse, which is
self-help.
Self-help, personal development, and growth of character.
Yeah.
He needs to stay away from science because, he just needs to.
Yeah.
One last thing about Joe.
Sure.
I don't even like celebrities, so let's stop talking about celebrities.
Yeah.
Actually,
Fine
let's stop talking about celebrities.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. All right. So, do you want to begin talking about a topic?
Yeah, let's talk about this topic.
Okay. So,
I love this topic.
The broad heading here is environment, right?
Yeah, or environmentalism.
Environmentalism, right.
Or I also call it ecosystem collapse.
Right.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, the scary doomer end of environmentalism. So, well, you said you love this topic. Why is, like, where does the love come from?
Because I think about it all the time. I've thought about this topic. I've thought about ecosystem and environmentalism so much in my life. Like several books that I've read. I've read 2 books about peak oil. I read Ishmael. You remember Ishmael, the book about the guy who talks to the talking gorilla, and the talking gorilla tells him about how, like, civilization is just fucked.
It's called Ishmael? I know a book called Call Me Ishmael.
Oh yeah, that's like the Redux.
Oh, okay.
Of Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. I also read, like, another essay of Daniel Quinn's called, like, a long essay, a short book called Beyond Civilization, where he talks about, like, the Genesis story from the Jewish Bible and, like, just all the foundations of civilization and why it pits us, like, against the environment. And
that sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's, like, really similar to what's in my Ishmael. And then the other, like, really foundational book about the environment that I read was Endgame by Derek Jensen.
Yeah, I think you talked to me.
Oh my gosh, anybody who's read Endgame,
you've told me about that one a little bit before.
Devastating. It's devastating because he just lays out this argument that is too strong against why, like, everything that humans do is just destroying the planet.
I mean, entirely believable, and I haven't even heard any premises yet.
Well, yeah, because you've researched some of this yourself.
Yeah, I haven't read all that many books on environmentalism. The one book that probably sticks out to me the most, and I have read and I think about a lot, is Silent Spring.
Oh, that's the pond scum one, right? She has, like, the pond scum metaphor. I actually haven't read that one.
It's all about pesticides, but I'm sure I don't remember exactly. There's probably what you're saying is probably in there. It's been like 4 years since I've read it, but
oh, that's the one about pesticides.
It's about pesticides. It was written in, like, 1964 by Rachel Carson. I think that's the name, and it's at least widely credited with, like, really starting the environmentalism movement of, like, people actually giving a shit about it.
Yeah.
Because for the past 20 years before that, we're using a bunch of pesticides, thinking, oh, it's so great, and then she releases this book with a bunch of studies on pesticides and how they fuck everything up, and people are like, oh, maybe we should actually pay attention to what we're doing. And we still haven't paid attention.
Yeah, I mean, if you read stories, like, firsthand accounts from, like, the 1800s of people coming to America, just, like, talking about the sky being black with flocks of birds.
Yeah.
And, like, bison herds, and, like, the trees were the old growth forest. A squirrel could go from one end of America to the other without ever touching the ground, There's very little rainforest left, but there was, like, a ton of it in North America. Stories about, like, chestnuts on the East Coast that when the chestnuts would fall, they would go up to your knees. It's probably
it sounds, like, a bit poetic, but
it's slightly poetic, but, like,
still the idea behind it is probably true.
Past your ankles, in any case. Yeah, And what's with the pesticides? So yeah, you kill the bugs so that you can grow food to feed humans, but then I don't know. Do you remember from that book?
Well, a big part of it is how pesticides just kind of get everywhere, and they're not, even if you just spray them on a farm, which we don't anyway. But even if you did, they spread in the wind, and also because the plants themselves have the pesticides on them and then get travel all over the world. Like, you can't go anywhere without coming into contact with pesticides anymore.
Mm.
Even if like you go to Amazonian tribes who are light contact, like as little contact with technologically modern humans as possible, you still find contamination through
What's the big one?
pesticides.
Glyphosate, I think, is one of the big.
Glyphosate is a big one.
Which is a neurodisruptor, right?
Yeah, it destroys DNA. And
Cool.
yeah, basically there's a lot of what was thought of or like put forward as these pesticides will target insects, and it's like it turns out that's not true at all. They kill everything. Like, they kill humans too. It just takes longer because it's like they kill the insects pretty immediately, and then but not quite immediately. They die like maybe over one generation or something. And then the birds are eating the insects, and then the birds maybe die over 3 generations. And then, it goes up and up the food chain until you get to the point where the things that humans are eating, those things have been eating pesticides, and those things have been eating pesticides. So it's like bioaccumulation. So then it gets to the point where now it's like humans, just everything they're eating has trace amounts of pesticides in it, which builds up. And it's not just a human-centric thing either, because the idea was also like, oh, we're going to dab pesticides on trees in this area to like get rid of the bugs that are infesting our neighborhoods or whatnot. And then, oh, we killed the tree, and we killed everything that goes on the tree, like the squirrels and it just spreads everywhere.
Yeah.
There's the only targeted pesticides that actually exist are mushrooms, as far as I'm aware, anyway. And we don't use those because
Mushrooms are pesticides?
not all mushrooms, but like you can make actually species targeting pesticides out of mushrooms, and we don't do that because it's, I don't know,
Less cost effective,
probably.
probably?
Yeah. We've already put so much time and development into the pesticides we have that are just massively destructive that don't want to switch to a new budding technology. Oh, and a couple more fun things from the book about pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a study done on, I think it was mosquitoes, and pesticides in normal amounts that mosquitoes would be encountering in the wild, and also just collection of mosquitoes from the wild anyway, but also in lab and also, in the field, collecting both. And then you look at how it's affecting them and their DNA. And over, I think it was like 30 generations for mosquitoes, it's turned them hermaphroditic, and then it also turned them sterile. So they died out because of bioaccumulation of pesticides throughout the gene pool down this lineage of mosquitoes. And my theory is that that's exactly what's going to happen to humans, just it'll take a bit longer.
That's frightening. With the amount of like not just pesticides, but all different types of chemicals that humans have started putting into the environment, playing around making cleaning products, dyes, all types of different things, different kinds of like things that we add to paints and plastics, and like we've just introduced so much stuff to the environment. And then all of the strange compounds that are released when you burn hydrocarbons like natural gas and oil. Like, it's just like so many different new chemical compounds being released into the environment in such a short period of time, like 100, 150 years. And like you start looking at humans and you're like, oh yeah, look at all these like weird autoimmune diseases that we have, and like all these strange cancers. And it's like, and then like I've looked at, I've seen video footage of like people with gray hair from the 1800s like carrying straw bales on their backs and stuff. And I don't mean this to say that like all of science and technology is bad, but also like I feel like if we slow down and we're a little more careful about how we developed science and technology, if we were more patient with it, like, and maybe profit motive has something to do with this too. Like all I'm saying is like people were strong back then, and something's going on that's kind of like I think weakening a lot of us, and it might have something to do with a lot of these chemicals that we're introducing to the environment.
That's a new one I haven't heard necessarily. The weakening of people. Do you mean just like getting into old age or throughout the entire lifespan?
I mean like these autoimmune disorders and stuff, and just
Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah.
Another issue, I guess, a reason why pesticides were so prevalent is because, trying to feed a lot of people and explode the population, especially like after World War II. So you're doing a lot of monoculture farming, purely for efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you are growing only wheat on a field, then whatever natural predator insects there are to wheat, I guess predator is a weird word when you're talking about plants, but still, whatever.
Scientifically accurate terminology.
Sure, yeah.
It's predating the wheat. Yeah.
Whatever, the insects were that would prey on wheat, would eat wheat. Still sounds weird. Would eat the wheat. If you have, wheat in conjunction on the same field with other crops, then there's like insects that prefer those crops. Like if you have insects that like apple trees or strawberries, whatever it is, there's some sort of ecosystem balance that happens there, at least, depending on how you do it, where you can get these insects that if you only have one type of insect, they overwhelm the whole field. Versus if you have lots of different, like polyculture farming, then the insects, they kind of prey on each other. They keep each other's numbers down, especially through pheromones. Like they don't want to go near those crops because that's where those dirty insects live. We don't like them, so they don't eat the wheat. But if you only have wheat, now you have this problem of, these wheat-eating insects are literally everywhere, destroying all our wheat crops. We need a way to kill the insects. You don't really need to even solve this problem if you do polycrop farming instead of monoculture. But it's just that, it takes longer to harvest if you have to, alternate your harvesting methods because you've got one plant right next to another plant of a different species.
You pointing that out, that's like the ray of hope right there, is that like despite all the environmental problems, that like we are recognizing our environmental problems and we're like figuring out like different ways of doing things that could fix some of these problems.
I mean, they are solutions, or at least partial solutions, but they'll never actually happen. Well, I mean, never is a strong word, but, you get the gist. Because companies are
Profit motive?
short-sighted, and it's like, why would we do this other version of less efficient farming for the sake of the planet if we can make lots of money right now?
I mean, I agree that it makes it difficult when
Right.
a very small group of people are really interested in making money, and I do think that religion and I don't want to attack religion as a whole, but certain like anti-science sects of the religious community who just are choosing to ignore reality
Sure.
and facts, and that's really problematic when you have like people are ignoring facts and driven by greed. Yeah, that's a huge problem. But I think that mass movements of regular people can force the corporations, greedy people to change. Like we have more power, and I'm gonna use that to kind of transition into kind of one of the first points that I put on my list here of stuff I want to talk about, which is the abundance of solar and wind that's come about recently. Even though it is not as profitable as fossil fuels, it's still growing at a very big rate, and in Europe even more so than America. And that's because normal people who do care about the environment, who do care about global climate change and recognize carbon emissions as a problem, are forcing the legal system, the government, to make the economic and legal landscape more favorable towards these things so that they can grow. So I wouldn't say never, and I'm glad you took that back, because I think it's really important that we don't say never. We have to believe that there's a way forward. Otherwise, we'll never try to go forward.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, you can't give up.
No, there's no giving up. There's only the way that's going to work, and we have to do it, I believe.
The thing I've heard about solar and wind from people who are less gung-ho about environmentalism, or maybe just like skeptical of renewable energy or green energy or whatnot, or at least the early transition to it, is that there isn't enough usable land on Earth for like spots where solar and wind is effective, for it to be a solution. Definitely not on its own. And then
Hmm.
another problem I think that I've heard is that the transportation of solar and wind energy, or like storage of the energy, is inefficient, especially for solar too. So it's like you might have these pockets where solar and wind, one or the other or both, are really effective, but then that'll only be in a solution for that particular area.
Hmm.
If you have a lot of solar power and like, or not solar, obviously not solar in the UK, but like wind power in the UK, that's not going to help anybody that's living, half a world away from the UK. And then you've got half a world away from the UK, they can't use like harvest to the same extent. So it's a partial solution, I guess. It's a step forward,
I
but
agree. I'm also not super gung ho about solar and wind. For a long time, I had been saying, and I heard other sources saying, and for a long time, solar and wind, like you construct a solar panel, and it took more electricity to create more energy, like mostly made by fossil fuels, to create that solar panel than that solar panel would create in its lifetime, because
oh,
a
yeah.
solar panel lasts about 20 years. That's not true anymore.
Yeah, I would see that's the type of thing that just gets better and better over
It is
time.
getting, they are getting more efficient, they are getting better, and solar is now finally making net energy gains.
Oh, okay.
But the question is, can you power the mining machines
Yeah.
to get the solar, the materials you need for the solar, which is aluminum, coal, you still need coal to make the actual panel, the silicon.
Right.
And I looked that up, and yes, they are actually starting to make mining machines like that are run on electric.
I think it was the same problem with like heavy duty farming equipment too.
Yeah. But it can probably all be made electric.
Yeah.
And if it can't be made electric, it can be made to run off of hydrogen fuels, and hydrogen can be made from water using electricity.
Yeah, I think so. To I guess maybe be a slight devil's advocate on the whole prospect, I suppose. Jared, who was on episode 30, I believe, had a few things to say, not just on that podcast itself, but also outside of it. He basically makes the point that it seems like a lot of people are trying to transition to these things right now, and he's worried that that's going to be catastrophic because we don't necessarily have the infrastructure or the machinery to actually make use of it right now, or to do it efficiently, or to actually to do a smooth transition, to maintain the same amount of mining or farming, if we were to say within the next 10 years transition to renewable energy. So if we try to do it too fast and try to force politicians to do it too fast, then you risk like famine, or large scale societal issues, because everyone's like, we need to shut down the nuclear power plants like they did in Germany for some fucking reason. And then
Well, we'll talk about nuclear in a minute.
yeah. And then it's like, oh, but how do we produce our energy? I guess we don't. We have to buy it from Russia.
What I would say to Jared about that is, wait, do you know how long? I don't know this. I'm like, how long was World War One?
I don't know. It started in 19
Like a few
So-
years?
yeah, it was less than a decade for sure. I don't
In the course of that
6 years or something.
war, they went from fighting with horses to fighting with tanks.
That's true.
So I think that's kind of, I'm gonna call bullshit. The human race is incredible. When we pull together as large nations, or we're at a point where we can pull together as a globe, we can change things so fast. We can, and I do hear there's a point of caution there. Like, we have to be smart. We don't want to like create unnecessary famines or something as a
Yeah.
result of being like, you have to. But I think we can be a lot more aggressive on this than people who hold stocks in fossil fuel companies want us
Right.
to think.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
And if you're invested in the economy at all, and the richer you are, the more invested you are invested in fossil fuels. You just are. If you're on like in any index fund or any kind of mutual fund, like, they're in there.
Yeah. I mean,
So.
I think at least this is how it works with the meat companies, but it seems to me that the fossil fuel companies are probably invested in renewable energy companies because they want to,
Hedge their
hedge their
bets.
bets and not fail completely.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think, it's like Shell and like BP and like a lot of the fossil fuel companies are the ones who are putting. I mean, it's not like I'm not congratulating them, but they are like some of the leaders, at least so I've heard, in renewable energy because it's like they probably realize that they don't want to be left behind when the world is trying to change to this. So they want to be the ones who have control of that new market.
So I read this really, really informative book about peak oil called The End of Oil. It was written by some dude. It was most people probably couldn't get through it because it's just like too many facts. It's like just really dry. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what's going on with like the oil situation. This was written in like 2011 or something, and I read it like last year. But it's still so for listeners that don't know, peak oil is the idea that from like 1910 till today, like 1910 being when they first like started like drilling for a bunch of oil, that we have been increasing and increasing and increasing the amount of oil wells on planet Earth and like drilling for more and more oil. And our economy, oil is like crazy efficient for like the amount of electricity or energy that you can get out of like each ounce of it. Like compared to coal, it blows it out of the water. It burns hotter. Things like jets, like don't even think about running a jet off of like fuels made from coal. Like it's just not gonna. It's gonna be so inefficient. You'd need so much coal to make like 1 ounce of jet fuel. But oil, that's the stuff, man. And we just so you can imagine like this ramp or this like curve going up and up and up as you drill for more and more oil. But at some point, you hit a point where there are less oil reserves than there were the day before,
Right.
and that those oil reserves are harder to get at. They're in the deep sea. They're under Arctic ice. They're shale oil or like tar sands, you know? So they had predicted that many scientists and environmentalists were predicting that peak oil would be hit somewhere between like 2010 and 2020, like right around now. Now that didn't happen because if that had happened, you would have seen oil prices start going up. And that didn't happen because of technology in deep sea drilling and tar sands, and because green energy has lifted some burden from oil for producing electricity, and natural gas has been a huge one in the past 10 years. Transporting natural gas has become more efficient, and a lot of cities are using it to produce electricity. But all that did was push back this idea of peak oil a little further than they had anticipated. At some point, it's still going to get to a point where you can't get at the oil easily, or there's less and less of it.
Yeah. Because it takes millions of years for oil deposits to form, and
So
we're going through it way faster than that.
so then from that high peak of oil production, it's going to start to drop. And then it's like, where do you get your energy from? So I think that you see these energy companies, and when they say energy companies, they're basically petroleum companies, people that drill for oil, are starting to invest in transitions of renewables like electric, like solar and wind, is because they know, they've been doing the research, they know that they're going to hit peak oil soon. So they have to be ready to transition, but they're not ready yet. These are capitalists. They are going to milk their
Every drop.
machinery
Yeah.
and their research and all of the capital that they put into oil. They're going to milk it for everything they can. Then they're going to switch to renewables and nuclear. They're going to have to switch to nuclear. Unless this is okay, and I want you to push back on this because I'm not sure about this, but let's say I don't think humanity, unless we have a dramatic reduction in energy usage per person or human population, there is no way that people are going to do all the stuff that they want to do with their lives, own all the stuff that they want to own, run all the electronic devices that they want to run with just solar, wind, and hydro. Like,
So not including nuclear.
without nuclear to
Oh yeah,
replace
no, I
fossil
think you
fuels,
definitely
I
need
don't
nuclear.
think it's possible to keep living the way that we are with the number of people that we have.
I don't think I can push back on you on that one. Yeah, I am a very strong advocate for nuclear energy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Aside from the cases of management like Chernobyl,
Hmm.
um, it's like some of the cleanest energy you can get, aside from like solar and wind. Actually, maybe even more than solar because, like you were saying before, it still takes
Coal. You
coal
need
and a lot of
coal.
stuff to make the solar panels in the first place.
Yeah.
Hydroelectric and geothermal are actually much better
Hydroelectric's like the
in
best.
terms of clean energy.
Yeah.
But
But almost every large river on the planet is already dammed.
yeah, and nuclear energy, and especially in terms of like energy output to
Amount of fuel
amount of
need.
pollution that's going to be,
Oh, yeah.
it's probably the best ratio there because you're just getting so much more power from it than you are from most any of the other renewables.
But Greenpeace, like the activist organization that's been around for a long time, Greenpeace, they hate nuclear energy, and because it's tied to nuclear weapons. And I think that's also another reason why like a lot of governments are kind of scared of it too, like using it widespread across the world, because if you can if you have centrifuges to enrich uranium to the point of energy levels, you just keep centrifuging it and you get to the point of nuclear grade, like weaponry grade. So like it's hard to like let countries have nuclear energy without also like, oh, they could sneak some nuclear weapons in there, you know?
So, do they think that mutually assured destruction doesn't work?
Yeah, because I would push back at that and would say I think every country should have a nuke
Right. And then
for their sovereignty, for their yeah, for them to be able to be like, hey guys, like stop put USA,
right.
Russia, China, stop pushing European Union, stop pushing us around, like, but
But then it also comes down to some countries are less reasonable than others, and would you want them to have nuclear weapons when perhaps they,
mm,
for instance, Iran, where it's like a theocracy, or like Afghanistan, where it's like they obviously, if you are a person, I guess we're getting into religion with this comment a little
it's
bit,
fine.
but if you are a person who believes in an afterlife, there's some amount of devaluation of this life that will naturally occur,
Mm,
which I would presume would make you more likely to press that
nuke
launch button
button. Mm,
because you're like I mean, like basically, if you're like kamikaze pilot, like if you have that mindset, you probably don't want that person to have a nuke. They're
mm.
willing to destroy everything because they're going to go to paradise, or so they think.
I yeah, there's some valid argument there. It sucks that one of the reasons why like Islamic fundamentalism has spread so much in the Middle East is because it was so ripe to spread because of the ways that European and actually all of the superpowers have like been fucking with the Middle East so much, and we just like keep going in there and destroying their countries and stealing their resources, and climate change is really screwing with their ability to access water and food, and that's been a real reason why, because they've been so beat up by the rest of the world and get such bad deals from Western corporations who come in, and I feel like that's kind of why religious fundamentalism has spread there and why we're seeing such an ugly side of Islam, when I mean Christianity has an ugly side too, but like when people argue that like, oh, Islam's worse, I wonder how much of that has to do with the amount of suffering that's been inflicted on that region by quote unquote more powerful countries.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess there is a good reason to allow basically all countries to have nuclear weapons, is so that they can actually stop being stomped on.
Yeah.
If you think about like Iran pre like 1971,
Mm.
that's actually probably a fine country to give nuclear
Super
weapons to.
progressive.
Yeah.
They were doing really great.
And then I mean, I don't know how much of it is causation, but I'm sure a lot of their relapse into, medieval religious thinking was probably the U.S. fucking them over and other countries, purposefully manipulating their societies and installing puppet
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, it's
regimes.
like, dude, not only do you have a bunch of these peasants that are like going through drought and famine, and so they're like really angry and upset, that, and somebody, the United States is like buying up their land where they used to like herd goats or something or grow crops, and like we're drilling for oil and stuff over there instead. And they're really angry about it. So that anger can definitely be like misguided. But then I wonder, it's like, so what's the CIA doing? Like, are they purposefully creating religious fundamentalism in those countries so that the United States has moral grounds to invade that region, right? Because it's a really old, like, all empires have done this. Like, the idea you instigate, like, you create, what is it, agent provocateur? You, like, create the enemy within, so that you have justification to go invade.
Yeah.
I mean, the United States we did it in the Mexican-American War. I think we did it the Spanish-American War.
I mean, that's slightly stepping into the grounds of conspiratorial thinking, but it is completely believable.
It's definitely conspiratorial thinking.
It is believable, though.
Yeah. I can't prove the one about the Middle East. Yeah. Maybe it'll come out in later decades, as some of these other conspiracies have come out in later decades.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to put anything past CIA.
Yeah, they're good at what they do.
After, like, reading what MK Ultra or whatnot, it's like,
they're allowed to do almost anything if somebody stamps it with national security. And because you need oil to run the United States military machine, access to oil is national security.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny to me when people watch, like, I don't know if we talked about this on the episode. So, like, when people watch the Star Wars movies and they don't realize that, like, the United States is the empire. Like, we're the bad guys.
Yeah. This is not related to environmentalism, but how much do you think the average citizen should feel responsible for the evils of the country they live in?
Some.
Yeah, some, but not like 100%.
Yeah. No, not 100%.
Not 0%. You're not off the hook,
some.
But yeah.
You should be trying to do something. Like, at least vote.
Yeah.
And I'm not even gonna get like mad at you if like you voted for like the wrong guy or something because you believed like the wrong person's lies. But like, at least like try.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, show some compassion towards like folks that don't live in the United States who get like shitty economic deals all the time because our military just goes around pushing everybody around. Like, just acknowledge that that's happening. Maybe could be like a good first step. Yeah. We're super, super blessed to be living here. Even like, and I know it's not the same for all folks in this country, but like, generally speaking, like, not having bombs dropping everywhere, having a grocery store with food like within a few miles of where you live, not having to toil in a field to sell like coffee beans to another country just so you can buy enough rice to feed your family because you don't own the land, because like, just be grateful for living in the U.S., man. It's like, we're lucky. We're lucky. There's still parts of the world that are just, not doing so good.
That being said, still a lot of improvements yet to come for the U.S. and for how our standards of living and how the ways the U.S. are fucked up could be fixed.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that.
Yeah. One of your notes here was nuclear/Ukraine.
Oh yeah. Well, going back to the nuclear, you're a proponent. I guess I'm a proponent. I feel like.
What's your hesitation about?
The waste.
That actually, I don't have a solid, detailed argument right now, but I would ask you to look it up at least somewhere, because I'm pretty sure, I'm under the impression anyway, that the whole idea of nuclear waste is outdated. Like, it used to be a problem of like, what do we do with this nuclear waste? But I don't think that's actually a problem anymore.
I think you're right, but I don't know if that's Bill Gates' propaganda or not. Because I heard that they can now completely deplete it down to iron or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's the case that there isn't such thing really as nuclear waste anymore. Like, you don't just have these barrels of radioactive material sitting underground somewhere waiting for the day that they leak everywhere. I think you just use it all now.
In which case, then the only concern, because it's way safer, like just the amount of like asthma that's caused by like fossil fuels
Yeah.
kills way more people than nuclear ever has.
Yeah.
Like nuclear energy has killed so few people, it's like ridiculous. So I do think, yeah, it's pretty safe. But yeah, I guess just like the maturity of like humans having access to nuclear weapons, which
That's the main
comes
thing.
with, yeah. But I think there's a lot of alarmism, yeah, about nuclear that isn't really justified.
Yeah, it's like, humans, including me, you pay much more attention to the big news events than the slow background insidious things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the millions or whatever it is, tens of thousands of deaths that you could be directly attributed to smoking cigarettes every year. It doesn't stop people from smoking cigarettes. The same thing goes with fossil fuels and pesticides and like factory pollution and all this. But when there's a big nuclear reactor explosion, like, and 100 people die, and then also it's like now that area nobody can live in it for the next 45 years or whatever it is with like Chernobyl, that like sticks in people's memories, so they think, oh, nuclear must be so much worse than all the other things because of that huge explosion that happened in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Fukushima in what, like 2011 or something?
There's been like three or so, like big.
Yeah, but how many big
nuclear
like
events.
well,
And then, I mean, there is the oil spills that just fuck up in the entire Gulf of Mexico, and people seem to care about that for a while, but that doesn't stop them from, for some reason, thinking nuclear is worse. And I actually don't. I'd like to know how like prevalent that idea really is, because maybe I'm just, I'm sure I'm living in a bubble, but I don't know the people who think nuclear is some horrible thing. It's like, who are these people?
People who vote for the Green Party, Greenpeace, a bunch of like old school environmentalists from the 70s, people who like lived through like what was the thing with Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis
Right.
and stuff, like, yeah, they're like really, yeah. And I think there's like propaganda that's been pushed against nuclear by the fossil fuel industry because they know that's their next step, but they just want to sell all the fossil fuels first.
I'm still upset that the U.S. government never followed through on Nixon's plan to, I think it was, he proposed or he pledged or whatever to build 1,000 nuclear power plants by the year 2000. And that was like I don't know if it was 1,000 plants. It was some number like 100 or 1,000. It was a nice even number, and a lot of them that he wanted to build because, it's like at the time, this is before Chernobyl or whatever. It's like, this is the way to go. Like, and he was like, yeah, we're gonna reach 100% renewable, or like 100%, zero emissions or whatever by that time, and we're gonna be self-sustaining off.
Who
of
was that?
nuclear
Ronald
power.
Reagan?
No, it was Nixon.
Nixon. Oh, pre-Kennedy. Yeah.
Ronald Reagan didn't do anything good.
Well, yeah, he came later.
Nixon
so that
did
was after
some good
Chernobyl
stuff,
and
some
stuff.
bad stuff.
Yeah, people say like, nuclear is not economically viable, but that's only because of all the legal costs involved in opening a new plant.
Right.
And there's so many things written into the law because of environmental activists, which makes it so that they can just protest and like keep protesting and petitioning to have, and then they can just basically stall the plant for like years and years and years and years. So those legal troubles are what make it really difficult.
I'd rather they do this with slaughterhouses than with nuclear power plants.
I just saw something on Instagram, which is a bad place to get any kind of information. But like they were like,
especially now that it's
something about methane is like only 3% of like global carbon emissions. I thought it was something more like accounted for like 20% of the global warming effect.
Well, what do you mean by emissions? Are you talking about like actual volume or effect?
That's what I think. Maybe they were crunching their numbers wrong.
Yeah.
Because I know that like if you're counting molecule for molecule,
right.
like maybe it's just 3% of the molecules,
right.
but because methane is 20 times more powerful at trapping ultraviolet radiation.
Yeah.
Isn't it like 20% of the effect or something?
I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty sure the number in relation to CO2 is it's 40 times more effective at trapping the greenhouse affecting than CO2 is.
I just heard 23 times or something on NPR today, but who knows?
Yeah, it's
somewhere
high.
There. It's high, yeah.
Yeah, it's much worse. But yeah, that's a good thing to look into. That I don't have I don't have that data in my head. That's the type of thing that I've looked up before and then I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, I just feel like I know that the livestock industry is a huge contributor because of cow burps and cow poops.
Yeah. There's a billion cows. If you were to, sample the cow population 200 years ago, there would not be nearly as many. There would be like, I don't know, a couple 100,000 probably.
Yeah. So, in terms of the biosphere, are we just like what once was there was probably like used to be more plants and now
Oh
there's
yeah,
more animals
yeah. There used, I mean, the amount of
proportionately?
trees. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. It was so much greater, and just not even trees, but just yeah, general plant life that exists. Grass even, just like long tall grass that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, because this same post on Instagram was talking about like, oh, like it's all part of this natural carbon cycle between the animals and the plants, and I'm like, yes, that's true, but when you're messing up the proportions of how many animals there are and how many plants there are, it's screwing with the balance of how much carbon is going in and out of the plant. I guess you could call it like a plant sink where
Oh
all the
yeah,
carbon is being
yeah,
stored. And so as you convert more plants into animals, then more of the carbon ends up in the atmosphere.
yeah, yeah. Because the plant life, that's much more effective in long term carbon sink than animals. Generally speaking, are animals you kill and then eat, and then those
And they
carbon.
rot quickly.
Yeah, so while they're alive, they're emitting carbon, and then when you kill them, they're emitting carbon. Whereas if you have a rainforest, that's emitting carbon for like as long as the rainforest exists, which is for a rainforest probably a really long time. Versus the 1 billion cows that exist, those are all dying and getting reborn on a massive scale. But also a huge carbon sink that used to exist and doesn't anymore is marine life.
Mm.
There used to be deep sea huge fish such as tuna that are like hundreds of pounds and just existed in the oceans.
We've
Like,
pulled it all out of the ocean.
and now it's I don't remember this number either,
Crazy.
but I think it's roughly, there was like a National Geographic article on this that I read like a year ago. It's something like 10% of large marine life still exists compared to like pre-industrial era. So it's like we've
Wait,
overfished
how
it.
much? What percent is left?
10% of what was originally there.
Yeah, talking about things that are kind of like problems that are invisible. Like the marine situation is dire,
Yeah.
and people don't think about it because it's this whole ecosystem that's over there. We live on the land,
Yeah.
so like most of us are completely unaware of like, and if we do look at the ocean, we see like the surface.
Yeah.
So like
It's not
all of
something
that
you would
death.
notice unless you're like a lifelong fisherman who's noticed the decline over your dad's life and your grandpa's life and stuff. Your grandpa told stories about how many fish he'd catch in a day, and now you're catching less.
Yeah.
Although you're actually probably catching more because the fishing industry, where it used to be much more tame, is now using trawling nets that are fishing the depths of the ocean, taking everything that's there, even the plants that are affixed to the ocean floor, and just ripping them out. So you're just really it's just emptying the oceans, at least at the rate we're going.
There, going back to stories from the 1800s, written down firsthand accounts from the 1800s.
Is this like a book or something that
Rivers.
you're
Oh,
taking this from?
they're collected. These are collected from several different sources.
Okay.
But rivers that I can't quote. You just have to trust me on it.
All right.
Rivers so full of salmon run that like it's like the river is salmon.
Yeah, just like
You just like reach down a net and it would just be all full of salmon. That's when the run is happening. So all the
Right.
salmon are rushing upstream, but
yeah, it's not all the time, but
that's like not. That's not like the case in many places anymore.
would have been
And
much
dams
easier to
actually
be a
have
bear.
a big part to do with
Oh
that.
yeah, I believe it.
Dams. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. It's dire. I mean, it is. I want to be like earlier. I was like insisting that we be hopeful, and I super am, and
Yeah.
I'm searching for that pathway forward, but like, it is dire. I mean, not only. Okay, so you run out of oil, and then you start switching to renewables and nuclear, but like, do you run out of uranium eventually? And then like so. I mean, maybe the solution is mining asteroids. Like, okay, I'm open-minded. Like, yeah, there's a lot of environmentalists who will like scoff at that. I won't scoff at that. Like, I believe in human ingenuity.
The reason I would be worried about asteroid mining. I think in principle it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck cares about asteroids?
Yeah.
Of all things. Like, yeah, you exploit them for the resources. They're asteroids.
Sure.
But then it's like the company or companies that do that first are going to be the CEO of that company is going to be the first quadrillionaire easily. And then, like, imagine like how shitty Amazon is right now, how bad Tesla is, how bad, Facebook is. Whatever company gets a hold of asteroid mining is going to be that times 50. How much like economic value will be contained within asteroids mining of their
Sure, like
resources?
you can find an asteroid that's made out of mostly gold or something, or
and like the estimates of like what are
frozen
contained within
methane or
just
something.
asteroids, it's like
Yeah.
it's just crazy valuable stuff. So it's like ideally that could be done in a way that doesn't completely tip the scales in favor of some horrible company forever, like for a long time. So that's the only thing I worry about.
I mean, that's what guillotines and revolutions are for, right? I mean, that's why I'm into the Second Amendment. I mean, that's why you gotta hope that like generals in the army and stuff have like conscience, because yeah, runaway billionaires, quadrillionaires, whatever, trillion quadrillionaires, whatever you want to call them, like, yeah, and if that person is not of a high character, then yeah, that could be really problematic.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. It's scary. One person with too much power, right?
Yeah. Ideally, it would maybe be like a ton of different companies doing it, or like a first use. Never gonna happen. But first, you get a world government, and then the world.
Don't say never.
Sure.
They've been planning this shit for a while, Wade.
I just mean before asteroid mining happens. I don't see a world government happening.
No, probably asteroid mining's happening first. Yeah.
So like ideally, you get the world government first, and then asteroid mining is a nationalized thing.
You would hope.
But
I mean, that's why the United States is making Space Force, right? So that our space companies can be protected by American taxpayers while they go out and make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And we foot the bill on the defense services.
Yeah.
Right?
Great.
Yeah, and then, Musk gets to say, it was all me, so I'll take all the money.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that could work. We could just, keep, just finding asteroids that have, uranium, bring them back to Earth, and keep powering all of our electricity like that.
I mean, I guess that's much more long-term, but that's still not a sustainable plan. It might be enough that humanity just dies out after a couple million years before you exhaust all the asteroids for the materials, but still that's it's still non-renewable.
I guess what a lot of environmentalists and myself included are lamenting more than anything is that the planet is changing to the point where even if we're able to find some technological engineered solutions to keep living these crazy energy rich lives with all this electronic stuff, that the coral reefs are going to be dead. Yeah. And our grandkids won't see it. The rainforests are going to be gone and our grandkids won't be able to see it. You won't be able to go somewhere and not see a cell phone tower or a bunch of satellites, or the planet is going to be so full of lights that you won't be able to see the stars. And it's just lamenting this loss of the natural world. And it sucks because at the same time, I don't want to tell other people that they can't live the life they want to live. They're destroying our ability to live the life that we want to live, which is one that's more in touch with the natural world. So I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah. Waking up in a future where you haven't even seen a bird or a squirrel for who knows how long. They're just one thing I've noticed.
We'll just have VR birds.
Yeah,
it's
that'll
you
fix
just
it. It'll be just like it, just like real birds. Unrelated, but in one of the bathroom stalls at EWM, there's a handwritten Sharpie message that says, Ronald Reagan replaced all birds with drones in 1981. Be vigilant.
Birds aren't real, man.
Yeah, but one thing that I've noticed and of course it's anecdotal, but I'm sure it's corroborated by everyone else's experience, is that I feel like as a kid, when you were driving on the freeway, if you were going on a road trip, your windshield was covered in bugs. You'd have
Yeah,
to stop and clean your windshield off after a few hours. Now you can drive for 12 hours straight.
20.
20 hours, yeah, you could drive across the entire country
I did it twice, 4 times this
and
summer.
you'd have like 2 bugs.
I drove this summer. I drove to Arizona and back, which was like 22 miles each way, and to Maine and back, which was like 22 hours each way, and
Right.
then 19 hours. So I drove like 80 hours through country areas, and I didn't wash my car in any of that. There was like some bugs, but man, yeah, when I was a kid, like 20 years ago, and we would like drive to the Southwest, you drive through like Kansas, Nebraska, the whole front of your yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally different.
And a lot of people like to shit on Bill Gates for a lot of things, and I sometimes defend some of the things he does, but one thing that I think is absolutely fucking stupid
Mm.
is the attempt or the plan to kill off all mosquitoes, to eliminate mosquitoes from existence. Because
Mm.
of, I mean, the reason I suppose is noble in some way of like trying to eliminate
Disease, right?
malaria
Yeah.
and other diseases that are transmitted through insects and mosquitoes. But it
But they
seems like,
pollinate blueberries, man.
I mean, that, and it's like, it seems like such a great example of people having no regard for the consequences, the like the butterfly effect of getting rid of an entire species that accounts for a large percentage of body mass because there's just so many fucking mosquitoes. At least there used to be anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like how that will affect all of the other things on Earth, and just like, yeah, we're just gonna do it and see how it goes. It's gonna go horrible.
Hmm. Yeah, what are the bats gonna eat? And then something that eats the bats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just always like, do the thing and then fix the problems that arise later
Yeah.
instead of like, I don't know, humans just gotta mess with stuff, man. It's like, it's what we do. We mess with stuff, right? I don't know.
I mean, I suppose it's not that consoling, but after this world where our grandchildren think that tigers, they don't might not even believe us that tigers ever existed. Like we'll show them pictures and they'll be like, yeah, but I can make a picture of a dragon just as easily. Like how do I? Because
Right.
You won't be able to trust anything at
Because
that
they'll be able
point.
to make anything CGI that looks
Sure.
like realistic or whatever.
So
Yeah.
any parts of the natural world, they might not even believe you when you say it used to be like this. And then we all die off from famine, from pesticides, from microplastics, from
Or if we don't, yeah, because we're gonna go infertile, right?
oh yeah, definitely we're gonna die from infertility. But a couple million years after that, this Earth will be pretty nice again, I think. Not for humans because there won't be any, but the beauteous parts of the world that have died will reappear, and new species will exist.
Yeah. So this is actually my most like beautiful vision for the future on planet Earth is to reduce the human population by a lot. And people are already probably freaking out that are listening to this. I bet some of you gonna are yelling at the
Yeah,
speaker or the radio right
eugenics.
now. Yeah, and calling me a racist or something. But no, I think I'm not interested in this unless we all choose to do this together.
Right, you're not trying
And
to
really,
kill
it's
people
and really,
or make
it's
them stop having children.
women are gonna choose it, right? Because they're the ones who should have control over birthing. That's how it is right now. I agree with that. But yeah, because look, like 20% of the world's electricity or energy source comes from, oh, that might not include transportation, comes from hydroelectric dams. So if you reduced the human population to a fifth of what it is now, or about, let's say, 2 billion-ish people, then you could power the whole thing just on the large river dams. And you wouldn't have this problem of fossil fuels that are causing global warming, that are like screwing up the whole patterns of climate and weather and the ecosystems. And on top of it, you wouldn't have all of these other problems of, needing to have these massive food systems that require pesticides, or running out of things like fresh water and other resources, or chopping down. Like the rainforests would, like, the ecosystem would spring back if humans would just, like, reduce themselves some. Like the rest of the ecosystem would, like what you're saying, like, but we don't have to die. We could just, like, choose to, like, be smaller on the planet, and the ecosystem would just spring back so fast, and it would be beautiful, and our kids and our grandkids, the coral reefs could come back, and we could still even have enough people to do cool things like build spaceships and explore the galaxies and hire scientists to try and figure out how to cure cancer, and, like, we could, like, keep exploring intellectually and technologically and doing cool things and, like, building VR machines and stuff, but just, like, with less people on the planet.
Yeah, I have two things to say to that. First is I'm less optimistic that nature would spring back that quickly anyway.
We could help it.
We could try to help it, that's for sure. But, like, there are already so many species that have gone extinct under our watch. It's like those certainly aren't coming back unless we have a way of doing some sort of, like, zoological necromancy, like Jurassic Park style or something, which could be possible.
They're doing it with woolly mammoths.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that is a possibility of bringing back dead species. But it's more, I guess, on pesticides and other things like microplastics as well, is these things linger far longer than after we stop using them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose we could come up with a different technology to, like how you have carbon recapture, or like you have little Zumbas or Roombas that are basically going in the ocean trying to clean up ocean plastics. You could conceptually maybe you could come up with a technology that would remove pesticides and microplastics from organisms. But without that,
but there's already, like, microbes that are evolving to eat plastics.
That's true.
And
that's
evolving
another
to eat styrofoams.
That's
and, like,
another use of mushrooms.
I do think that the ecosystem will bounce back. It'll be different. It'll be a different ecosystem, but it will be. But
it's probably it's doable. Like, if we really put our mind to it. I'm just less expecting that, or optimistic about that actually happening. Like, I think it's conceivable that humans decide to stop going so hard on everything and give the earth a break, stop having as many children, stop using as much fossil fuel, stop using as much, just tone it down, and then, there's some amount of nature bounce back. But then I think it's a whole extra thing on top of that to think that humanity will decide to, like, actively help nature come back. It's like one thing to stop your activities and another thing to completely, like, do a 180, and, like, now everybody's getting into, replanting or, like, reintroducing species into, like, just, I don't know if
I don't think it's necessary. I think the ecosystem will just bounce
do it on
back.
its own.
I don't think you need, like, to, like, there's, like, this Greta Thunberg documentary where she, like, goes to this place where they're, like, pulling carbon. It's, like, plant that, like, pulls carbon out of the air, and it's, like, it costs so much, and this is, like, the biggest one in the world, and you would need, like, millions of plants this size to make any kind of dent. But, like, trees, dude, just, like, just, like, let the forest grow again. Like, let the ocean
so much money on
ecosystem
this
grow
factory
again.
that does what trees do.
Yeah. Like, you burned a bunch of fossil fuels to build this factory that pulls fossil fuels out of the air when you could have just been, like, you could have just... We just need people. We need both less people, but also... because I don't want to talk about overpopulation and not address the fact that, like, most humans through most of history and most of the humans on planet Earth right now are not consuming a ton of electricity.
It's the Western countries.
It's developed people. So the problem is, if we want everybody to be developed, we can't have 8 billion people developed at the energy level of consumption that we are. But if we can have less people and then, like, develop the people who are undeveloped to more technological life, but also like make the benchmark of a good life not have everything to do with like consuming stuff made in a factory, made out of materials pillaged from the natural world, and just like live lives that are more humble and in tune with nature. And this is actually somewhere, I know we said fuck celebrities, but this is actually something I liked about Joe Rogan, is he does talk about like living, because Joe Rogan's like into evolutionary biology, and so am I, but trying to live. I think part of the reason why we're so unhappy is because we're living in a way that isn't in tune with how we evolved and the environment that we evolved to live in. So if we lived more sort of in a traditional way, maybe in tune with nature, I think there's all this positive feedback of like in our brain where it's like, oh yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be when I look up at the night sky, I see the Milky Way. Like it's not supposed to be like drowned out by the city lights. Like it's supposed to be like all this green space around me filled with all these plants and birds. Like the night air is supposed to be filled with the noise of crickets, and the daytime filled with the sound of like birds. And like that's just like our entire being was created in that kind of environment. If we can put ourselves in that kind of environment again, I think we'll feel happier.
Yeah. Although it would take quite a lot of backward travel, technologically speaking, to go to a place where, we are evolutionarily, quote unquote, designed for.
Some middle ground.
Yeah.
Where there's at least enough of it in our life that we can like have that good feeling, that natural
Right.
good feeling. But I think there's also something really exciting about like challenging ourselves and what we can do technologically. So I'm not saying throw that out. I'm just saying balance these
Right.
two things way better than we are now, because it's like we're going so hard on technology, like cities, music, like electronic screens. It's just like too much. It's too much.
One thing I'll say that I don't really I don't really believe this. I guess I'm just gonna put it out there though, is the one of the potential downsides of reducing the amount of people that exist is that it also reduces the progress of certain things that we care about, such as like preventing or fighting off or curing diseases, or like making scientific discoveries, or that kind of thing, creating more like beautiful things such as like music. The less people you have that exist, the less scientists there'll be, the less whatever it is there'll be, generally
Mm.
speaking anyway. So I guess that's obviously it's probably still worth it to do that, but that is one thing you miss out on. It's like if we have a certain pace of like scientific knowledge advancement right now, and we cut our population down by 1/5, I would guess that our scientific knowledge advancement would also go down by like 1/5 the rate, roughly anyway.
Yeah, let's just slow down and be more patient as a
Yeah.
species. Let's like grow into a wiser humanity that's more patient.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on the verge of like, well, and like my other thing is like we don't even equitably distribute the technology that we have now in terms of like disease prevention. Like there's all this like funding that goes to like cancer research for like weird rare cancers because like some rich person's kid or like some senator's kid got a weird cancer, and now there's all this funding for it. But like with that same amount of money, could you like how many malaria nets could you buy? How many
Yeah, that's true.
vaccines for, I'm trying to think of what's one of the diseases that's out there that should have been eradicated but it's not.
Like polio.
Yeah, how many antibiotic pills for somebody that could die from like dysentery or something, like we're not my point is we're not equitably distributing and fairly distributing the technology and medicine that we already have, yet we're trying to push for like more advanced specific niche medicines. It's
Yeah.
like, come on.
Yeah, it's like donating the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital is a nice like feeling and all, but it's probably one of the least effective things you can do with your money if you're trying to save people's lives. Like it takes hundreds of thousands of, or perhaps more, dollars to save one life by giving to St. Jude's Children's Cancer Research Hospital,
And then there's people who are dying because they just don't have clean water.
or like malaria nets that
Yeah.
cost $1.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
obviously we should prioritize that. Although, should we prioritize that? Because then if you are saving lots of people very effectively, the world population doesn't go down, or at least it doesn't go down as fast, is it, obviously you're not going to actively kill people, not going to actively try and pressure people or force people to not have kids, but then on the other hand, should you actively save people?
Yeah, I think we should live in a world where we take care of each other.
So then you're saving people, and then now
Then it's going to lead to starvation.
the rate of that could be a problem. The population rate is only going up, and then now all the people that you've saved, you have to convince them, or hope that they choose to not have kids.
Yeah, I don't think you have to convince people. I think all you have to do is educate women and give them opportunities outside of being mothers, which a lot of the traditional societies, and also you have to provide them medicine, because a lot of the human behavior of just pumping out kids that we do, because we do a lot of that, is from an earlier time when most of our kids were dying before the age of 3 or something. Many would die in that first year. But now, because of antibiotics and vaccines, most of our children live. So once you develop a nation, it's clear, once you develop a nation, give women access to jobs and education, population flatlines.
But I think that's the problem, though, is that if you're trying to get...
Not flatlines as in a flatline like we're dead. It flatlines as in it stops growing.
Yeah. But that's a problem, though, because if you're trying to get the population to decrease, say, the perhaps arbitrary number that we threw out earlier, get to 1/5 what it is now, the reason that, people who look into population estimate that human population will peak out at around, 11 or 12 million or something, or billion, or something, is because you need to get these developing countries developed first before you'll get people in the position to even want to or think about deciding not to have kids anymore. So by that point, you've already increased the population, and now it's just going to flatline. When's it going to go down?
Yeah, I'm thinking, so after that...
Then it goes down over
after
time?
that, what we would have to do is we would have to choose to have one child per woman for half would take us down to 6, half of that would take us down to 3, half of that would take us down to 1.5. So 3 generations.
Yeah.
So in about 75 years, we could get back down.
3 generations of global population rate being 0.5.
Yeah. It would have to be a choice.
Yeah.
But we chose to get into this situation we're in together, right? We chose to go after the coal and then go after the oil and do all the things that we're doing. We've chosen this together.
Would it have to be a choice, though? For instance...
I'm not into it if it's not a choice.
You don't like the model of China?
No, I don't.
Because
that's not a world where we're taking care of each other.
To give credit where credit is due, though,
mm-hmm.
They've had the one child... Well, I don't think they have it anymore, but they had the one-child policy for a long time because they probably realized these things. And I think they're, world leaders in, reforestation. I mean, they're also world leaders in, population surveillance.
They're also going to be world leaders in nuclear energy soon. I think they already are.
Probably. So I think it's
India achieved. There's a province in India that I think we talked about this on the first one. Oh, there's a province in India that achieved the same reduction as the one-child policy,
but through choice,
by just having a policy of educating women and putting women in the workforce.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to do things.
Just give women. I don't think people appreciate often just how radical feminism still is. And how new it is that women have any freedom in their lives. Because, we talk about black people didn't get the vote in America until, 1865? It wasn't until another 60 years almost, in 1920, when women got the right to vote. And at the state level and culturally in businesses, most states still weren't allowing women to own property, have bank accounts, or very many types of jobs. So... yeah, I mean, it's radical, but, this is why people are, against the patriarchy and stuff, because patriarchy is connected to colonialism and capitalism, and it's connected to environmental destruction and population growth. It's all connected. So I'm going really, off the deep end here, but, you give women the right to not be domestic slaves like they have been for the past 2,000 years until, very recently. Like only maybe the 70s is when it became popular to hire women in places and for women to not be married and for women to have bank accounts and property that they own themselves. Like, so it's only been 2 generations.
I certainly hope the results of this are just a transitional phase, though, because while it's all great to have increased autonomy for women, we have this negative side effect of now everybody is a wage slave.
I know. Oh man,
Like now, so
me and my roommate talk about this.
if you're living in the 1950s, there's this expectation society that one man can make enough money at his job to pay for like a house and children and a wife and like
And
have a
two
car
kids,
and stuff.
two
Yeah.
ki- two cars,
Now
2 kids.
you have both people in a couple working and they can't even afford an apartment.
Yeah, this is weird because I almost feel like the feminist movement and putting women in the workforce was like
Just give companies
ended up being like some weird capitalist trick to get us
Exactly.
to work to get
Twice
the
as
labor
much.
of 2 people
Right.
for the what they used to pay one person. Now they're getting both people away from the home, and it really is destroying the family. So it's like weird because like as a feminist, I'm like, yeah, awesome, but then I'm like, oh dang, like the conservatives are right. It's like destroying, quote unquote, like destroying family values or whatever. Because like now you don't. But that has to do with the low wages, with inflation for the past whatever 50 years and wages staying the same.
I mean, maybe the solution is we need like 7,000% more unions.
7,000% more unions. I
Because
think.
it's like, oh, now they have like men and women working, so that gives companies like an opportunity to just fuck everyone over.
Yeah.
So it's like you need to like force the companies to not be allowed to do that, I guess.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
as of right now,
this
yeah,
gets
it's
back
just
to why even though like environmentalism has been the thing I've thought about and is like the most existential threat in my mind, is the reason why I talk about socialism way more because like you gotta fix the unjust human economy before people even have like the autonomy and freedom to go, oh well, maybe I don't want to live in this kind of world. Maybe we shouldn't just be like, industrializing the planet to death.
yeah. One thing that I've been thinking for the past like hour or so is that it's interesting to me because it's the divide between like conservatism and like whatever liberalism or whatever you want to call
Mm-hmm.
it isn't so clear because in a lot of ways an environmentalist is a conservative,
Mm-hmm.
like because you want to go back to an earlier way, at
Mm-hmm.
least in regards to how we used to treat the environment. And so it's like maybe you don't want to go back to an earlier way on how we treat women and how we think about other things, but like in this aspect it's like cherishing the past and wanting to revert to that rather than keep pushing forward.
I mean, we live in an Orwellian world. The liberals fail to liberate, and the conservatives fail to conserve. It's
Yeah.
just it's just like what are they double speak or whatever.
Right. So before we ended this episode, I was interested by your small suggestion that you're dipping into the world of
Oh,
religion.
yeah, I've been going to. So I was raised by 2 atheists, but
I feel like that's unusual.
it is a bit unusual, yeah, in America especially. Yeah, I've been going to Unitarian church now.
What is Unitarian?
Unitarian Universalism, UU. They are one of the religious groups that came to America because they were persecuted in Europe. Thomas Jefferson was a Unitarian. Unitarian Church started in Transylvania, of all places, in the 1500s. There's some political upheaval, and then there was like a king of one of the kingdoms there, but all of the people in his land kept like killing each other or like fighting with each other over like religion, and the lords were like, king, you must choose a religion to just
Yeah,
unite
pick
the
a
land
side.
and just like put
Oh,
this
okay.
to rest. Like once you choose an official religion of the state, the fighting will end. So the king held a conference and he invited like all of the religious thinkers and leaders of the different like sects of mostly different types of Christians in that part of the world, but Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, and brought them all and had them speak like dusk till dawn, like several days in a row. And there was this one guy who talked about uniting the religions and just like, and not having a specific one, and that all of these people are just accessing God in a different way. And the king decided he liked that one, so he made a law that nobody was allowed to speak ill or fight another person based upon their religion. And then he made his kingdom's official religion was Unitarianism, and it grew out of that. So, famous American pastors of the Unitarian Church are Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, who both left the church, the Unitarian Church, because they didn't think it was progressive enough, and started the Transcendentalist movement. The Unitarian Church has since looked back and decided that they were right, and has tried to progress and continues to try and progress and update itself. They include atheists, Buddhists, agnostics, Hindus, anybody of any religious or non-religious community is welcome in their church.
How are atheists included? Why would an atheist join it?
The first time I went there, I still identified as an atheist.
Okay, what brought you there?
A community of people that was concerned with leading a morally good life and doing good in this world.
So this is how I imagine it normally goes anyway. Tell me if it was or wasn't like this. Does it go where the community comes first and then God belief comes from being surrounded by other people who believe that same thing? Like you're drawn to the community for that reason, and then you start actually believing it because everyone around you believes in it.
So it was like a few years back when I was still identifying as atheist when I went to the Unitarian Church, and I just went one day and then I didn't go again. And then I went one day a year later. But recently, just this past summer, I've gone almost every Sunday that I've been in town. But I started going again as a believer because I decided, so I'm an agnostic. I'm now firmly agnostic, but I've chosen to believe that there's something magical going on here.
So what did you have in mind in the difference that you were going with between atheist and agnostic?
Well, even when I was an atheist, I wasn't agnostic.
Sure.
Because I don't know.
Right.
But I felt fairly certain that, there's not some humanoid brain thing that's planning this world.
Yeah.
Or just that all of the religions would make these very specific claims about the nature of God and what God wants from humanity. And I'm just that's BS. Those claims are way too specific.
Sure.
If you were going to say but if you were going to get really amorphous about God or scientific about God and say, well, God is the universe, or God is the thing that exists where knowledge ends, or, these concepts of God are more palatable to me. But I think what broke me on the agnosticism versus atheism was simulation theory.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because
that I actually think is the strongest argument in favor of a godlike thing.
Yeah, if we're inside of a simulation, then there could actually be some white man in the sky who doesn't want guys to have sex with other guys.
I would still find it very implausible that the simulation designers care about that.
But they could have programmed that into the simulation.
Yeah, sure.
But my point is, silliness aside, right? My point is, I don't know, and
you don't know, but you lean towards yes.
No, I don't. I just like what happens when I consider the possibility. If I just say that there's something magical, unexplainable, but that it's some kind of force that's connecting things, and maybe it's some kind of brain that has some kind of plan. I just like how that idea changed the way I feel about my life, and how being open to that idea has made me able to be in community with religious folks who I've had a long-standing bigotry towards, and being able to drop that bigotry.
What definition of bigotry are you going with here?
Just saying nasty things about religious folk all the time, having a real bias against them, just stereotyping them as stupid, silly, childish, unintelligent people, because I felt like, just like, oh well, I know, like, how can you guys just like believe in these fairy tales, you know? But when I decided to believe, and again, there's no evidence for this. I'm not saying I know this. I'm just deciding to believe.
So wait, if you're believing though, so are you believing or not believing?
I'm an agnostic who has chosen. I don't believe.
You're like agnostic theist, perhaps, like not knowing believer, rather than
Yeah,
a Gnostic theist, or okay.
yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm at now.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
if the Unitarian Church is accepting of all creeds, what is it that happens at this church? Like when you go, is it just
They
like, is
give
there a sermon at
Yeah,
all?
they give like a sermon or a lecture of sorts.
Like what would that even be if it's
Like 4 years
supposed to?
ago, the first time I went, it was on the Big Bang, and then they juxtaposed it with some other creation stories. More recently, when I've gone, stories about personal growth, stories about. I think a lot of times they've said their concept of God has. Sometimes they just substitute in the word love,
Hmm.
which I like, because I previously would say like this cheeky thing where I'm like, yeah, all these people talk about God, I think they're just forgetting an O. They're worshiping good, whatever that I like. What that idea that there's like something that's good and there's something that's bad, and we're gonna try and be good,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that's kind of what they're doing by subbing in the word love. It's just like, well, how can we just focus on things that are good? And I know, like, as an atheist when I was, and I know you as an atheist, like, you don't need a religion to do that. But at the same time, we already have this sort of psychic vehicle, this cultural vehicle, which has existed for so long, for which to focus people's energy into trying to be good, that this huge jump into atheism, I don't know if it's use. I'm not saying, I know the people that I know that are atheists are very concerned with being ethical people, but at the same time, there's something really great about stepping into a room full of people who are there to try to understand how to be better people, and then go out into the world and do that. I would love to see atheists
I'll
doing
agree
that.
with that, and I think so too. I think obviously the thing that's like non-believers are probably missing the most is a church-like activity or service where you can get together with like-minded people in service of something good in a community. So I'm all for trying to figure out how to be an ethical person, like getting together to talk with people about things that you find like beautiful and wondrous, or like telling each other stories. I just take issue with the fact that people like believe things that they don't actually have sufficient reason for.
Mm.
So like if you had the church service without any of the supernatural, or like without any of the assumptions, or without any of the non-fact based discussions, then it'd be a great place for me.
I usually call the Unitarian service, I usually call it a lecture instead of a sermon, because it often is too smart to be a sermon in my mind. If they do tell stories that are supernatural in nature, they always recognize that it's supernatural. They've recognized that they've been wrong in the past, and like I said, they continually update themselves, and they've incorporated science. They're very much a science-based church. It's super cool. It's super cool. I go there, and there aren't a ton of young people. There are the children of some of the middle-aged people that have their own like Sunday school type thing that they go to. I would love to see more people my age, late 20s, early 30s, showing up to Unitarian Church. Atheists, agnostics, everybody's welcome.
What did you mean earlier when you said the jump into atheism?
I just feel like atheism, I've noticed more maturity in it recently, but even like 10 or 15 years ago when I was younger, I noticed a lot of like toxicity in the community, and also a certain nihilism. Like I meet a lot of people who they're like atheists and scientific thinkers, and And they're like, I know the world is doomed because look at this list of facts that I have to back it up. You know? And that was me. That was me. And it depressed the crap out of me, and it made me angry at everybody else who wasn't doing enough to save the world. But I just can we create an atheism that has hope? I mean, I know they're not like mutually exclusive, that they can go together, but I just don't see it that much.
I
And
mean, that
so
seems to me what most people are drawn to religion for.
atheism is not so much, I mean, just look at it. It's a declaration of what you're not instead of what you are. So instead of being something, it's a rejection of something, right? So in that, it's kind of like a jump into nothingness in a way. This is kind of like the criticism of it, is that because you're pushing yourself away from religion, but then you look around yourself and it's like, what do you have? I mean, you have science, but what do you have for your spirit? What do you have for your emotional well-being? I guess you have psychology. I don't know. It's just without the richness of human culture and the wisdom and the color, the flavor of religion, I think that scientific atheism, psychology, just it's very young, and I don't think I just think it's kind of cold. And
I mean, you still have like personal relationships to provide you with happiness in life, and you still have culture, even if you don't like the religion part of it. And also, I would push back a little bit on the idea that it's young. Perhaps it's young in terms of like mass acceptance of it, or like mass amounts of people claiming to be it. But I think it's hard to judge whether atheism at all is young. I find it hard to believe that literally every person for thousands of years believed in a god, and more likely that because it was so dominant and in most cases so oppressive, that you're just better off not saying anything if you don't actually believe yourself.
Sure.
So it's like if you look at 1500s Europe, it's like every single person's a Catholic, but are they really? Like,
Right. Well, even people call them, yeah, well, I was gonna say people call themselves
yeah,
certain
even people who
religions
are
today, and they
Catholic,
don't
yeah,
really
exactly.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but I just have to say that since choosing to believe that maybe something magical is going on, my life has changed.
Yeah, I'm suspicious that something spooky is going on, maybe half the time, but I would never characterize it, well, almost never characterize it as like a god. Like maybe we're in a simulation,
Yeah, I haven't
maybe
really.
we're in a dream, maybe so on, but like,
I like to call it God because, like I mentioned early, because of using that word for this magical force or whatever it is, helps me to connect with other people.
yeah, it's just the word everyone uses.
Yeah, and what I've found is that despite a bunch of really terrible stuff going on in religion, there's also a bunch of really great stuff going on in religion. And I've been able to connect with the good stuff and the good people. And I've also found that like my bias towards religious folk was totally stereotypical, and that there's a super richness, and that when you give these people a chance to explain what they mean, many of them also have very complex or views of the religion that they're a part of. They don't wholeheartedly agree with all of the dogma. They have their own ideas about what God is, about ethics, but also just like agnosticism, not just about God, but agnosticism about everything. Because when I was younger and in this like sort of know-it-all personality, it's just a real asshole thing, and it's just like you walk around and you're ready to end every conversation because you don't need to listen to anybody, because they need to listen to you because you have all the answers, right? And when you decide that you don't have all the answers, all of a sudden your ears are open to witness people, your eyes are open to witness people and hear people, and then all of a sudden your relationships start blooming in ways that you didn't know were possible.
I do think that's still possible, though, within the context of being an agnostic or an atheist.
No, I'm saying that is agnosticism. as opposed to and I'm not talking about God anymore. I'm talking about just like
Sure. Yeah.
knowing things versus not knowing things, and deciding that like you don't know
Yeah.
things.
I suppose this is something that I find anyway, is that like in my case too, like for instance, I would use the descriptor atheist, but usually what I really mean is agnostic. Like, and I find that's true for really most people who would call themselves atheists. It's
I
like
agree.
it's if you say you're an agnostic, usually a lot of people that you talk to, maybe like if I talk to my religious family member and I say I'm agnostic, they think that like I it's like a much softer position that like maybe God exists, and I'm like that I don't think that God exists. Like, so I think atheists aren't really aren't really using it most of the time to mean I know that God doesn't exist. They're using the like the lack theism definition of like I lack the belief in God. I don't believe in God, so it's really just agnosticism. But you don't say agnosticism because it comes across as like you're on the fence.
I agree. That's almost every atheist I've ever met,
I
when
said the same
pushed,
thing.
agrees that they are actually agnostic. I mentioned my parents are both atheists.
Same
They're
thing.
yes, if you push them, they're like, yeah, I don't know, because you
Right.
can't know.
Yeah.
But like basically we operate as if there's no God because that's what makes the most sense to us.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess yeah, if you're the difference though that you were talking about of deciding that you know a thing or not knowing a thing and being accepting of other people's ideas and listening to them. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's something that you need to have, and yeah, being in that
But
know-it-all
you shouldn't be
space.
so open-minded that if somebody tells you that CO2 is good for the environment because plants
Right.
like it, yeah, you gotta shut some stuff down
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Your mind needs to be open on both ends so that the things that go in can also leave.
Yeah, definitely, yes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you can't push back against people and have like healthy like debate or like conflict. It's
Right.
just like you don't have to. Yeah, this is better.
Yeah. I try to not have those stereotypical views that an atheist might about religious people of thinking that they're idiots or unsophisticated or whatnot. And for the most part, I think I accomplished that. I think like I can have good, healthy conversations with religious people and hear what they're saying, and a lot of time, it makes sense, and like I get where they're coming from. It's just certain conversations, especially with people who are like, like if you're trying to be like a apologist and you're like really trying to like push these arguments for God that
Are
like are
illogical.
illogical and
Oh yeah.
have been holes have been poked through them for hundreds of years. It's like that's where I'm like, you think this is a good argument? Like what? Then I get in the territory of doubting somebody's intelligence if they think a certain argument that is riddled with fallacies is good. But if somebody's simply telling
Well,
me their experience
but
of
it's
like
interesting because like
love in life, that's
they
great.
can be so blind to their own illogic on the religion issue, but then be totally logical
Oh,
about everything else in
exactly.
their
Yeah.
life. So like clearly they're an intelligent
Exactly. Yeah.
person.
Right.
They're just like really. It's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't
Your
like it
intelligence can be compartmentalized where you don't apply it to universally. Yeah.
when they're just like, God said man's the head of the household and you shouldn't have sex with people of the same gender, and like it's just like I'm just like like, and you're telling me for sure that's what God wants.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy.
Yeah. And I mean, the same thing is true about us right now and other topics, I'm sure. Like, we don't apply our intelligence consistently across all the things that we believe
Yeah,
in or accept to be true.
absolutely. I'm sure I'm guilty of it.
And I said this in the first episode we did of Good and Evil, and I try to apply this to morality and to intelligence when I'm thinking of myself and other people of like, just because you don't adhere to a certain thing that I think is moral doesn't mean I should think of you as an immoral person.
Mm.
It's like you can have these different domains of, perhaps you have like something that I might deem not completely moral here, but then in this other aspect of your life, you're exceeding me in anything I could ever
Is
hope
it
to
because I
achieve.
eat meat? You brought that up because I'm eating meat.
Well, no, I mean I brought this up in the first one, and then yes, it was. But it's like yeah, like a person might eat meat and be unaffected by animal suffering or whatnot, but then on the other end, they also might just be a better person to their friends and family,
Hmm.
and might be more engaged in their community. Might
So how does that balance out,
right. So you can't just kind of blanket judge someone as being immoral or moral. And then it goes the same way with intelligence. Like, yeah, you might not apply rationality to your like arguments for God or something, but at the other end, you might be extremely intelligent, more intelligent than me in lots of other ways. So it's not like I can just think of a religious panderer, like certain people I know, or certain people that appear in my YouTube feed a lot, as being across the board unintelligent. It's like they obviously are intelligent in many, many ways.
Yeah.
So you can't make a comparison quite so easily.
Yeah. I will say that some religious folks still really frustrate me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to say that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess my mind was going on some other tangent, but I don't know if we I already forgot it, so.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think that we'll probably have to about do it for this episode of the podcast. Unless you
can I give a suggestion?
Oh, sure.
Something that, because I listen to all your episodes, so I know how this goes. A suggestion for the audience to how to spend their time?
Oh, I thought you meant a suggestion to me. No, yeah, definitely that. I was going to ask you that, yeah.
I just keep stealing your thunder,
No,
Wade.
it's okay. I thought you were about to suggest to me I should do less abrupt transitions, and I was like, yeah, probably.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Okay.
So books are cool. I guess TV's cool sometimes. But doing stuff. I just canned tomato soup from tomatoes out of my garden. And I just want to say, like, you should spend some time growing some food. Yeah. I feel like the audience should do that. Like, if you have access to any yard space or green space or have, community garden plot within, like, walkable or, like, quick, like, it needs to be close. Because you're not going to take care of it if it's, like, a 20-minute drive away. But if it's, like, a 5-minute bike ride away, yeah, like, get a community garden plot, grow some food, and eat it. Because it's magic.
I mean, if you even don't have access to that kind of thing, you could still buy a pot and try to grow, like,
on a porch,
some oregano or something in your windowsill.
Absolutely. Grow something that you can eat and eat it, or grow flowers that you can watch bloom and then maybe cut a few and put them on your kitchen table or something like that. Like, grow something and enjoy it. That's my advice.
I like it. Well, thank you for my voice is dying. Thank you for being on this episode with me.
Thanks for having me, Wade.
Yeah, it was a good time, and thank you for listening. And if you feel like supporting this podcast, then that would be great. You can do that by sharing with your friends or liking it on wherever it appears, like YouTube or whatever. Simply listening to it is helpful. Or if you feel so inclined and you have the spare cash, donating to it would also be great. Thanks for listening.